Hello and welcome to the Wildcast podcast. This is your host, Michael Lev, sitting in for Justin today in the host chair. And I am joined by a very special guest. That would be the one and only Bruce Pascoe, our intrepid men's basketball reporter who happens to be covering the number one ranked team in the country. We will check in on all things Arizona basketball with Bruce here over the next 45 minutes to an hour. We thank all of you for joining us. Thanks to those who submitted mailbag questions. We will try to do this on a semi-regular basis during the basketball season. Bruce, how are you?
Good. How are you? Yeah,
I'm doing okay. I didn't win any awards this week like you did, so I'm sure you're riding high. After, can you maybe briefly explain to people
embarrassed?
what
maybe might be the word. I think embarrassed would be the word, but what I don't know. Yeah, no, it's not. I don't know what it is. I don't know how. Maybe people watching this probably know what Emoy is at this point, but it's pretty. You have to be, pretty into Arizona basketball to know. But it's basically Equipment Manager of the Year, which is Brian Brigger. He's a great guy, all that, he deserves it. In my opinion. And so I guess he has something called the Emoy of Person of the Year or something. And in my opinion, that should be Emoy. But for some reason, he came in last night between a break and the press conference and gave me this award. So yeah, it was quite surprising. So I don't know why. Maybe
congratulations to you.
Maybe it's just because I'm around the most and maybe the most annoying. I don't know, but it's not like I did anything legitimate.
Well, you're deserving of praise, regardless whether you deserve that award or not. You're out there covering the team, traveling around the country. They've been all sorts of places this year, and they've won games in all sorts of different settings.
Yeah.
What do you think has been kind of the highlight of all of your various road trips?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. I'm lucky that I am the only sort of outside media that goes everywhere. There's a lot of guys who make efforts to get to some places, but we go everywhere with them, and it's super fun. It's tiring and strange and stressful and all that, but it's a lot of fun. And I think probably, the highlight was LA and UConn kind of combined. I kind of combined it on my own personal road trip because I went straight from LA to Boston, and I actually went on my own. I went to the BYU UConn game at the Boston Garden just to kind of check it out, and I was like, that was pretty cool just to see that. And then I got some advanced stuff from Dan Hurley and those guys in advance of the game. So that was just a super fun trip for me. And then being at UConn, there's nothing better than a true big campus game, and those are getting rare in this day and age, but playing at UConn was really something. That game, a weekend night, and granted they juiced it up a little bit with their cheap beer night. I think it was $2, and I remember doing my Seen and Heard before the game, and I remember walking by all these little push carts of Miller Lite, and there was these long lines, and I'm thinking, what like it wasn't like it was some kind of crazy micro craft brew or something like that. It was just Miller Lite, which is fine, but like I didn't understand but then I later learned it was only $2. So so that was kind of fun. And and that was, to me, that's much more fun than a neutral game. But the LA game was interesting because that Intuit Dome was just state of the art, crazy. You feel like you're in a IMAX theater times 10, and the video goes all around like in an oval above you, and you can watch the game on any part of the oval, or you can actually watch the game as the game's playing out on the floor. I mean, it's a crazy building, and that was really something. And it was kind of interesting too to see that development that's gone on in that neighborhood. And you would know about this kind of in that Inglewood neighborhood. What's going on there. And I know there's been some complaints about it, that it's raised, all the rents are higher now and all that, but it's gentrification in whatever form you want to call it. So it was interesting to see that as well, which had nothing to do with the basketball, but just interesting to me personally anyway.
What was the composition of the crowd for that game at the Intuit Dome?
I almost thought it was almost half and half. I'd say probably was 60% UCLA, 40% Arizona, but it's Typically in those kind of games, the Arizona fans tend to be more vocal, especially if the team's doing well, of course. And but even at Pauley Pavilion the last few years, heck, it'd be 20% Arizona fans, and if they were winning, those fans were loud, and it would really kind of it would pretty much piss off the UCLA fans, and they try and drown out the U of A chants and all that, this and that, and there was a little bit of that going on, but I'd say I would guess 60-40 in favor of UCLA. It was definitely not semi away. It was almost a true neutral experience, other than the fact that it was 10 miles from Westwood or whatever. But the weather was
the weather was really bad in LA that weekend too, right? If I recall, was it rainy that weekend?
Oh, it was more. Yeah, I mean, I got soaked coming into the game. Yeah, it was crazy. I took a little bus over there, and then just to get from the bus stop to the will call, I had to put my backpack under my raincoat and just to keep my computer from getting wet. It was crazy. Yeah, you hardly ever have to deal with that in LA. So, but anyway, I was saying, like, and you saw this at SC, it's easy to underestimate how many Arizona alums there are in Southern California, and going to basketball games is part of the culture for a lot of them. So if Arizona's in town, a lot of them are going, and that's always been the case. They've always drawn really well. There's been years, you've seen it at the Galen Center where there's more Arizona fans than USC fans. How good USC is that particular year. So that, a lot of them showed up, and I think maybe now that they don't go there for the Pac-12 as much, there was maybe a little more incentive for people to get out despite the bad weather that night.
Well, having been to many USC home basketball games, they have a beautiful arena. You've been there many times. They had a very difficult time selling out that place. Usually, UCLA and Arizona were the biggest draws by far. And then is LA a college basketball town? Even that's I'm not sure that's the case. There's so much going on, with just general entertainment, amusement parks, concerts. You've got baseball, you've got pro football now, you've got hockey, you've got the NBA. The discretionary income can only be stretched so thin. So it's interesting when these neutral site games happen, where they happen, how much they cost, what the price points are. That's one of the topics we'll get into a little bit later when we get into our mailbag segment. But I do want to talk quite a bit here about the team itself, ranked number 1 in the AP poll. What have just been your kind of general overall impressions of the squad so far?
Well, I think they're probably as complete, at least what we've seen so far, complete team as we've seen from in this Tommy Lloyd era. And I thought coming into the season, I thought these freshmen are really talented. The ceiling might be higher for this team than any team that he's had, but I also thought the floor could be lower because he's never had to rely on freshmen the way he is this year. And but and so you never really know our freshmen, it's the old saying, like, you never really know till they get out there how good really are they. And but they are. There's been, Braden Burries probably was like lagging there for a while, and now he's going crazy all of a sudden. And so they've got that piece, and they've got, probably arguably the best front court in the country, and then, arguably one of the top 5 point guards probably in Jaden Bradley. And then, and now you get Braden Burries going off. You have that piece now, maybe a little more often. And then, the Anthony Del Orso, probably going to be one of the better 6 men in the country, the way he's doing in that role. So they have a lot of everything. And it's just a weird kind of barbellish kind of deal where you have 4 super veteran guys and then all these freshmen, and so that makes it interesting. But talent wise and skill wise, they really seem to have a little bit of or a lot of everything, and that's probably the thing that's kind of jumped out at me anyway.
Yeah, one of the things I like about this team and the composition of this team is that balance that you talked about between the veterans and the young players. There's just going to be inevitably a little bit more volatility with freshmen, right? Like Braden Burries, the last 5 games versus the first 5 games, like totally different player. Koa Pete, who is the marquee name in that class, he's had his ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
Like he's had some foul trouble. He's had some games where he really wasn't able to score very well. The guy that I've been kind of pleasantly surprised with is Ivan Karchenkov.
Yeah.
Menace on the defensive end, like
Yeah.
really pesky, and he's smart. He doesn't try to do too much. He's strong. Like he doesn't like physically look like a freshman. Moderate surprise when he, opened the season in the starting lineup, but I feel like he's proved that he belongs. Like
Yeah.
he's just as valuable as any of those other guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that he would be a big contributor, but I thought that Del Orso would start over him because in the past, Lloyd has mostly pretty much always gone, if it's close at all, gone with the veteran. I mean, he didn't even start Carter Bryant. We all know that story. Carter Bryant was a lottery pick. So what does that say? But he's proven that much better and in more ways. There's Del Orso has a lot of skills that they need, but Karchenkov, I think, as you mentioned, defensively, that was huge. And I think, the way he took on Keyshawn Hall at Auburn the other day, I think it was that was really kind of a revelation, the way, he'd been doing it all year, but that was a pretty high level, deal. And, it was interesting because I thought, you hear a lot about guys in Europe. You never, again, like any freshman, you're never really sure, but maybe even more doubt in the case that you hadn't seen him. But I knew that he had been playing, it wasn't like he was just playing on some junior team that he was dominating. He was playing on the senior team, and he had been playing spot minutes for the senior team this was like his third season, I think, or something like that. And he was the youngest ever. So, if nothing else, you knew he had that experience and kind of confidence from playing. And I think that was evident early this season when we had one of those introductory press conferences with him, and somebody, maybe it was you, I don't even know who asked, somebody asked, what do you bring to this team? And he said, I think I bring experience. And, we all kind of looked at each other like, he was 18 years old when he said that. But you know what? He's kind of right that he had experience. So I think, just different. But he's used to playing 28, 30 or 35-year-old dudes. They're big. And so he's not, maybe there's a little bit of adjustment, different game. Certainly they call it a little bit different, this and that. But he's not intimidated. That's for sure. And then, as he told me a couple of weeks ago, I think he got brought up in this club, and his dad was a coach and his mom was a pro player as well. It was drilled into him early in life that you need to defend or you're not getting on the court. And that typically with American kids, that takes them sometimes into their freshman or even sophomore years until they really get that. He already seems to know that.
Tommy Lloyd might have started this trend at Gonzaga a couple decades ago, but there are so many players from Europe and Africa and other parts of the world who have infiltrated college basketball and really elevated the level of play, I think, across the sport. It's sort of one of those things like when Chip Kelly first started doing that up-tempo offense, or Rich Rodriguez, like it was so novel. Now kind of everybody does it, so it sort of neutralizes the effect. But I feel like with college basketball that it has just made the sport that much better. There's just so much more talent. That plus, of course, NIL, keeping players in college a little bit longer. It seems like the sport itself is in a really good place right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's getting older, and there is a lot of international talent. And I think actually what's happening too, with speaking of NIL and revenue sharing from schools, more international, there's actually more of a supply. Even though there's more demand, there's now more supply because a lot of these international players, maybe would have gone to college if they were motivated. Now they can go to college and make as much money, if not more, in the US. So why not? And so they're literally, colleges are now peeling talent away from the European ranks that might have not happened 5 or more years ago, or even 3 years ago. And I think Ivan Karchenkov is kind of along those lines. He's a kid, if he didn't, have a financial reason to come here, I think he came here partly because he wanted to play more, and I think he liked the style of play. Don't get me wrong there, but it's possible that if there was no financial incentive for him to come here, he might have said, hey, I'm going to stay with Munich and keep developing and make my money over here. And then if I'm ready for the NBA, I'll go at some point or whatever. But instead, guys like him are now coming over, and it's happening So there's more and more, and you're right. It's certainly guys are coming back. If you're not a guaranteed, top 2/3 of the first round, you're coming back to college if you've got eligibility left, because you can make more money. You don't have to play that gamble being, are you going to go in the first round or not? You come back. Guys are coming back. JT Top and guys like that. There's a lot of examples like that. So it's keeping that talent around, which has certainly been good for the college game. It's there's other things that have made it different or challenging or whatever, but talent wise, it's definitely has improved.
Yeah, unlike football, there isn't as much injury risk with basketball, for playing another season in college. There's also certain guys who are effective in college whose games don't necessarily fit in the NBA, like former Arizona center Umar Ballo, I think, is a good example of sort of a traditional low post center, and there really isn't a place for that kind of player in the NBA. So, play in college as long as you can, make as much money as you can. Ivan Karchenkov, of course, was not the headliner in that freshman class. The two headliners were Koa Pete and Braden Burries. We have mentioned how Braden Burries has improved so much over the last 5 games versus the first 5. He himself doesn't say that much when you talk to him, right? He's sort of like, I'm more comfortable, I'm more confident. My teammates had confidence in me. What do you think has been the biggest difference for him these last 5 games versus the first 5 games?
I think it really is just confidence. I think we talk about Karchenkov's experience. He had that confidence. Koa Pete playing on a super high level with USA basketball for many years. And I think Burries was, he was Gatorade Player of the Year in California. He scored, I think, 44 points in his high school game, but the one thing he didn't have was that, just that higher level experience. He could do it, but so I think what happened is he just got thrown out there, especially game 1, Florida, defending national champions, and struggled a little bit. They went after him, he got in foul trouble, and I think that was just, so I'm sure he's learned a little bit about that, and when, how to be a little more careful, pick your spots, as far as staying clear of fouls. But I think a lot of it was just, veteran guys making his life tough, and a little bit of adjustment. And I think he seemed to play well even against, some of the lower major teams at home, even early. And then they go back, to UConn or whatever, and he'd struggle again. But that I think Auburn was a real coming out thing, and that he got that confidence, and that was at McHale, but against a really good team. And then he took it to another level, doing what he did at Alabama. And granted, a little bit of that is he's admitted, and Tommy Lloyd and Nate Oates have all referred to, Alabama did give him a little bit of opportunity there. But he, I watched all 15 points of those in a row again on replay, and he hit some tough ones. He did get a couple of pretty good opportunities, and one in particular where a player just backed up completely and just screwed up for whatever reason, and Burries hit an open one. But he did some things that he hadn't done against high level teams, and I got to think that a lot of that comes from confidence.
So he's very smooth as a player. Like, it almost looks effortless at times. This is a weird comp, and it's not perfect, but kind of reminds me of Kyle Anderson a little bit. I know Kyle Anderson was taller, sort of 6'9", but just like, it doesn't like it. It's just a certain smoothness, a certain pace that he plays with. Like, it almost looks effortless at times. During the broadcast last night, which you of course weren't listening to because you were there, they made a comp with Koa Pete that I thought was kind of weird. And I'm wondering what you think about it, and if you think there's a better one. But they compared Koa Pete to Charles Barkley. And again, it's like they're different shapes, right? Like, Charles was probably 6'5", maybe 6'6", thicker, right?
Yeah.
Koa Pete is a big, strong kid. Like, he could easily play offensive tackle or defensive end, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's taller, more of a pure power forward to me. Does he remind you of anyone in terms of?
I would say, maybe not, maybe just a hair less athletic, but maybe more like Aaron Gordon than
Okay, I've heard
Barkley.
that one. Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
because I feel like I think he's more skilled offensively at this point than I'm guessing Charles Barkley was when he was 19. But I don't know. I just feel like he's really athletic for his size, and physical, and also smart, knows where to be, and he can get there. I remember watching him last summer for those USA basketball workouts, and he was just the way he could move and get in position and get down the court for a guy his size really jumped out at me. And now he's doing it at this level. So, and that's what, Aaron Gordon was really good at as well. So, but there probably are others I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. I don't, but that's kind of one that jumps out.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's a good one in the sense that Koa does not need to score to have a positive impact on the game.
Yeah.
Like, he's a good rebounder. He can switch onto smaller players and guard them. He's a good passer from the high post area. I think everyone probably knows about his athletic background, his family, multiple family members who played professional or college sports, including dad and older brother in the NFL. So he's got like a level of athletic instinct that is rare for someone who's 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah,
you see that on the court.
Right. I can't tell you how many times I've written or learned about a great athlete who was the youngest in a family or one of the younger ones. You can't underestimate how important it is to have older siblings who just school you when you're, 5 years old or 10 years old or whatever, and you're constantly playing up against them, and it just sharpens you, and you're right. The instinct, I think, all the kids in that family are gifted athletically incredibly, and it's really unusual there, but also, there's a good culture. It seems to be a good culture in that family. Just having spoken to a number of them about what it's like and what they do and this and that. And, I think all that's kind of helped. I mean, it's obvious from talking to him. He's not a real quotable guy, but, he always says the right things. He seems to be, if you watch his body language, he seems to be, in the right place in a lot of ways. And that's just stuff you get, I think, growing up, and he's really got a lot of that sort of intangible stuff going on too.
Yeah, he's been a part of a lot of winning basketball, like 4 consecutive high school state championships, right? 3 USA gold medal teams, I believe, is the
4.
total.
Yeah.
Is it 4? Okay.
Actually, 4, because he played up. Yeah, he played up and he got a couple different. But anyway, yeah, but he's the first to do that, first to get 4 in the junior levels. 2 World Cups and 2 America's qualifier cups, which they play on alternate years. And so he did it. He kind of danced between 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever. This year was U19. So 4 of those, and then 4 state championships, I think 3 Arizona Gatorade individual awards. And say what you want about Arizona the quality of high school basketball in Arizona. There are a few programs, Gilbert Perry included, that are just superpowers, and he was on that team and dominated and led them to quite a bit of success. So you can't underestimate that.
Yeah, definitely a winning basketball player. I think another winning basketball player is Toby Awaka, who's adapted really well to coming off the bench this year. Something else that was said during the broadcast on ESPN Plus last night, we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. The Wildcats played on Tuesday against Abilene Christian. Matt Muehlbach said, and I quote, "Toby Awaka is the biggest and strongest player that Arizona has ever had." Now, Matt knows a lot about Arizona basketball. I thought that was quite a statement to make. I'm also looking at a chart here that Evan Mayakawa put out. It's the best rebounders by height across college basketball. It's one of those ones where all the logos of the teams are spread across a chart, and Toby's up there at the top, right? And according to Evan, Evan feels like he's the best rebounder in the nation. When you watch Toby play. Like any ball that goes up on the glass, like he is going after it with abandon. And it feels like he's going to win that battle every single time. There's nothing glamorous about what he does, but that is so valuable for a team.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
have a guy like that.
absolutely. Saul Bookman and I were talking about him last night. Just as he actually could, he could be he's become so valuable in that way. I got to think that the NBA teams are looking at him as a guy maybe he can play that role. There's certainly maybe a little bit of development, but it's interesting. I don't think he's a guy that would have been talked about that way a couple of years ago. I think Tennessee saw some upside in him, and from what I heard, they did not want to lose him, and they did. Then Owaka came here. He had a great year last year, and he's even more efficient this year. He was already one of the most efficient rebounders, and this year, last I looked on KenPom, he was number one in both offensive and defensive rebounding percentages. So play by play, pound by pound, he is the most efficient rebounder in the country right now. And it's interesting, like you said, that he's playing this role off the bench, which maybe has helped him a little bit in the sense that he's playing a little fewer minutes, that it helps his efficiency, kind of like Jaden Bradley a couple years ago, and he came off the bench and he was by far the most efficient player. But it's something else the way he has been like that, and I think also it speaks highly to him and the kind of culture they're building around there, that he accepted that role playing off the bench behind Krivas, because it would be easy for him or his parents or posse or who's ever around him to say, hey, you were honorable mention all Big 12 last year. You started. What the heck are you doing off the bench? You should be doing that. Or it'd be easy for him to think that way. But he's told me it's not only because he believes in what they're building as a team, but also he says a lot of it has to do with his spirituality. He believes in, greater things and all that, which, so anyway, once again, another guy where a lot of intangibles are probably helping this team as well as his skill level.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there speaks to the culture that Tommy Lloyd has created. I wrote the lead item of a News and Views column on multiple subjects about the men's team, and I used what Victor Wembanyama said the other day about ethical basketball, and sort of made the case that no team in the country plays more ethical basketball than Arizona. He's talking about, like modern basketball, a lot of 3-pointers, a lot of isolation, etc. Very team-oriented type of game that Tommy has promoted since he got here. And even when they play a quote-unquote lesser opponent, like Tuesday night, they're still sharing the ball. Like, you do not see guys who are like, you know what, this is just an opportunity for me to get mine. I'm just going to go off. I'm going to score like crazy against this bad team because I have the chance to. And, that's just never happens under Tommy. And if you look at like the scoring distribution, I guess you would call it, for this team, there's 5 guys averaging between 10.7 and 14.3 points, another guy at 9.2, another guy at 8.1. That might change over the course of the season if Braden Burries continues to play like he has, but that's always kind of been the case with Tommy Lloyd's teams, right? They share the ball.
Yeah, I mean, and part of it is his style of play. I mean, the screening and passing that they emphasize with, it just, you have to do that or you're not going to play. But also it does the culture, and it starts in recruiting. I mean, there's a lot of guys I've seen them kind of look at, and I know Jason and Shear and some of these guys who really follow recruiting know, there are guys they look at that are super talented that they drop because they're not going to fit in this. And so they select guys that they know can work in that. And that's one reason you see, guys generally sticking around. There a couple of them transferred with, arguably for NIL reasons or whatever. But the guys they pick tend to like this, and I think it almost gets boring at press conferences when inevitably they'll be like, "Well, my teammates are helping me out, this and that," and it's like you kind of roll your eyes because they've, they're coached to say whatever the right things and all that. But there is some truth to that. They really do think that way, and I think you can look at them, when in the games and watch the way they react when their teammates do score or something happens, that they're just as excited about, giving the hockey assist or whatever might be on that play or whatever. Like, it's not, it really is sort of more of a team dynamic. And that's, I mean, you look at this team and there are a lot of skills there, but I always think that it's somewhat, you have to look at the big picture and the chemistry of this team and how is it getting along. And this so far, it's really through the roof as far as the fabric that this team has chemistry wise. And I think last year, not that they were bad guys, but last year was a lot of fumbling around with the rotation. It wasn't clear who was doing what. And, they weren't sure what to do with Carter Bryant, and, Mo Krivas was back, but he wasn't fully back, and then he got hurt again. There was just a lot of weirdness, and it wasn't until that cleared up in January and that team started playing well. But this team doesn't seem to have that problem. That from the get-go, they had an 8-man rotation, and that's what they're going with, and guys are accepting it, and it's really made a difference.
Yeah, of course, the on-court maestro is Jaden Bradley. And the great irony of the Alabama game was that both Bradley and Coapete had foul trouble in the second half. And that's when Arizona actually expanded the lead, which is a testament to the depth that they have on this roster. But when I watch Jaden Bradley play this year, I see a vastly improved player. He just seems to be in total control of what he's doing. He knows where to go with the ball. He knows when to drive. He knows when to dish. He's making plays on the defensive end as well. That play last night where he just ripped the ball out of the guy's hands and headed down the court was really something. But, this is what happens when, a player with, NBA caliber talent decides to stick around for the entirety of his college eligibility. And here he is as a senior playing like one. This is, a lot of times in the NCAA tournament, the teams that have the most success are the ones that have those veteran players. And that's Jaden Bradley. He's a veteran leader of the team. Yeah,
especially guards, right? They're, good junior, senior level guards win championships. It's in the men's game particularly. He's added a little bit to his game every year. I think this year he's sort of, it's been interesting to watch his development. He's, came in and played that super efficient role off the bench as a sophomore, and then last year took over as a starter. But Caleb Love was sort of the go-to guy, and now, maybe Burries becomes more of this guy. But until now, when pushes come to shove, like you said, Bradley's running the team. But if they need some buckets at the end, he did it. He did it against UCLA. He did it against UConn. He's not afraid. And I got to think, he's had some really good level experience. I mean, he started most of the time as a freshman, so he's basically a 3.5-year starter at this point. Just a ton of experience on top of him taking kind of a educated approach to the game. I think he's quietly, you don't usually see this from guys, but quietly tested the draft twice now. So each time he's getting feedback about what he needs to do, what he's doing wrong. So, he's not only hearing from the U of A coaches and working on that, but he's hearing it from NBA guys. And I think that's added a lot to it as well, and then I think the final thing, and this, he'll never say this, but deep down, I think it probably did tweak him a little bit that he wasn't on that point guard list, the top 20 point guards, 20 of them listed in the preseason. He wasn't one of the 20. Although, that needs context too. A lot of times those things are committees of people mostly based in the Midwest or East, and they don't know what he did last year or whatever. So it's just it's not necessarily any sign of disrespect as much as people just not knowing. And I think it's people who follow Arizona over the years, you just know it's always going to take a little extra when you're from Arizona to get national attention. It just does. There's just most of the country lives on the East Coast, and they're sleeping during your games. That's the way it is.
Jaden definitely has looked for his shot more this year. I think he understands that he needs to do that with this team without having someone like a Caleb Love in the backcourt. But he seldom, if ever, forces it. It's sort of like when they need me to score, I will look to score.
Right, exactly.
And it's almost always going to the basket. He drew a ton of free throw opportunities against Abilene Christian. Oftentimes he is just drawing contact lobbing the ball up off the glass. He's got great touch. He's got a whole variety pack of different moves and floaters, bank shots. I really like the way he plays, and also doesn't turn the ball over very much either. So he's just a good, smart, efficient point guard, and really kind of the perfect guy to lead this team that is still very young, right? Literally half of that 8-man rotation is true freshmen. So Like I said at the beginning, there's going to be some ups and downs with those guys. Having a steadying influence like Jaden, I think is just really the perfect blend.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would have thought, especially this first month and a half, that there would be more ups and downs. And there's, Pete's had some foul troubles and a couple of tougher times. And certainly, as we've discussed, Burries did. But for the most part, playing a lot more consistent level than I would expect. And typically those things get better as the season goes on for freshmen. So, that bodes well for Arizona too. I mean, these guys are already kind of playing at a second year level, experience wise or whatever. And to see maybe what could happen down the road, their ceiling is pretty high for sure.
All right, let's dip into the mailbag here. I have a few good ones. The first one here from Carl Hansen. It's really more of a comment than a question. He posted a screenshot of tickets, or like a sort of an advertisement for Saturday's game up in Phoenix against San Diego State, which is part of a doubleheader at the Mortgage Matchup Center. I guess that's what it's called now, where the Phoenix Suns play. His comment is, wow, this is what he says, dripping with sarcasm here. Wow, lower bowl seats are now only $215. Such a bargain. Nosebleed seats are $36. Will it be a sellout? And I would like to ask you, Bruce, in conjunction with that comment, what did you make of what Tommy Lloyd said at the end of his presser Tuesday night, where he just kind of went off on his own, trying to appeal to people to come to the arena, to come and see games over Christmas break, etc.
Yeah, I mean, he's frustrated, and it's easy to understand why. He's got the number one team in the country, and they're not selling out. And I think he thought maybe people were staying away because they thought it was already sold out, so they didn't bother looking for tickets. I don't know if that's the case, maybe, but I think it's long been the case that Arizona doesn't sell out, especially over the winter break when students are out, and they're playing kind of mid to low major teams. They just, it's typically not, but they will sell out. They did sell out for Auburn. They will for, a lot of the Big 12 games ahead, but there are some. So he was trying to drum up some interest. I think, for they still have 2 more home games remaining in the non-conference season, and those are during the break. And they might have only 10 or 11,000 in there. And I think he was hoping. I think they're trying to do some promos where they can sell tickets as low as $13. And if they, I think his argument was that, hey, if you can go to a movie, you can come to an Arizona game. So $13, why wouldn't you come out? The other thing is, the students are gone. It's holiday. People are out Christmas shopping. If the game's too late, whatever, it's easy for people to find reasons not to go. And so that's part of it. And then I think you mentioned too, they'd like to see a big crowd on Saturday. And to your point about the seating map, I don't know exactly. Some of these vary as far as how they work, but I believe when you play a neutral game like this, the promoters are in charge of all the pricing. Mm-hmm. And if they mispriced it, what are you going to do? In some cases, the last minute. In fact, they did this in Birmingham. It was not, from what some local reporters told me, that game was not selling well, and they just blitzed it with promos and 2-for-1s or whatever they did, and it was almost full on, and it was very very loud. You would have never guessed it was something that wasn't doing well. So somebody fixed that. I don't know whether they're going to fix Saturday. I don't think it won't sell out. I'm not sure if it'll be even a decent crowd, but they had 11 when they played Alabama in Phoenix a couple of years ago. This one though is December 20th, Saturday night before Christmas. That that's a tough ask, I think. In a kind of pro sports market, you're basically, I think Arizona's just hoping that a lot of the U of A fans and alums in Phoenix will come out, and that maybe some others will drive up from here as well. But it remains to be seen. It should be a decent game too, because San Diego State is they haven't played great, but they've got arguably top 25 talent, and they could beat them. I mean, it wouldn't be unheard of. And then it is also, if anybody's really diehard enough, it is a doubleheader, and Colorado, which has also been playing pretty well, and they're going to see Arizona. They're going to be in that first game playing Stanford, sort of an old time Pac-12 matchup in that one. So I think it's an interesting billing, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking at this now. I'm seeing, $55-$60, I guess, for the lowest tickets. And then it can be, up, depending on how close you get to the floor, it could be a couple hundred. But again, I think a lot of the promoters, they think they can get it. And, maybe in some cases they can. I don't know. It's the pricing is tricky. I don't know what the strategy there, or maybe there's an algorithm trying to do it somewhere or something like that. I don't know.
Do you get into both games for the price of one ticket?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something.
Yeah, it's a free Colorado Stanford game if you want it, folks. I mean, they did that 2 years ago. I believe it was, if I remember right, I think it was ASU and Northwestern or something.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Before Arizona. Oh, that was before Arizona played Alabama. I think the game with UCLA last year, I think that was just a one-off, just that game. But this is a doubleheader. I think, if you're into college hoops, I think it's worth showing up at 6:00 and watching both games.
So we have 3 former members of the Pac-12 and 1 future member of the Pac-12, exactly. Right, with San Diego State. Yeah. The bizarro little mini Pac-12 tournament up there in Phoenix. All right, this one comes from Red Hat Cat, and I am so glad he asked this question because this is a topic that I don't really understand well, but I think you do. Red Hat Cat asks, does the Big 12's new deal with the Players Era Festival jeopardize Arizona's announced participation in the Maui Invitational in 2026?
Well, it could, but they are allowing teams to carve out of that. They would obviously qualify for that the way they've structured it, but they've said that the teams can get out for something like this. And Tommy Lloyd's been on the record saying, we're going to Maui, we're signed. I think that they could probably get out of the Maui if they wanted to. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll be interesting to see if Maui actually ends up basically giving teams more money, because they're not. Everyone knows you lose money when you go to Maui. You get some hotels and some things in that, but the costs are so high. Usually teams end up losing money to play there, but they play there because it's so prestigious and it's a great recruiting tool. It's a great, fans love it. Players, get an experience there or whatever. It's a great time and a super great atmosphere in that little arena there. And I think that's what Tommy Lloyd's looking at. He's a big picture guy. And I think that he's just like, we want to go to Maui because that's the place to be. The Players Era is a different deal, way different atmosphere. It's just money, and you can make a lot of money there. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes. But I think I would take Tommy Lloyd at his word here and say they're going to go the way it is now. There's been no indication that I've heard of to the contrary. I think they'll give it a shot. But if Maui's in a position where they need to get some more sponsors and start taking care of the school's expenses and maybe paying them a little bit on top of that, or they're gonna become a mid-major tournament or maybe just die completely, and that would be a big blow to not only them but the game of college basketball, because that's probably the number one early season tournament out there, and it would be something to see that go. But that is under threat. But so I would say, again, for next year, I think Arizona's probably going to be there. But after that, who knows? Yeah.
There's a little bug flying around. It's been driving me crazy during this podcast. Oh. So this Players Era thing, Bruce, for those of us, I'll include myself in that group, who don't follow preseason college basketball tournaments that closely. Like, what is this thing and how did it become such a big deal seemingly overnight?
Yeah, they changed it a little bit. I mean, it became a big deal because they, right off the bat, they were like guaranteeing teams $1 million to play in it. And, even after your expenses and this and that, it's just, and it's something you can use in recruiting and tell your players, hey, we're going there, so there's going to be more money. Now it's, it has to be funneled through revenue sharing. So I don't think it's necessarily going to give you as a player that much more money, but these things are changing all the time. I don't know. But the bottom line is it's a lot more money to play there and to get for your team. You know, and it's proving to be pretty good exposure wise too. I think Maui's still more, at least as of right now, is still more kind of coveted as far as looking at it. But they had a lot of great teams there this year, and the way Michigan killed everybody, and you know, a few teams played really well and sort of made a big impression there. So you know, there's some value in that, but it's basically just you know, promoters got together and decided to you know, entice teams to go there, and I'm sure they got some maybe backing from Las Vegas kind of in a slowish week there, where you know, they could do some ties there, that there was some incentive for the city and tourist industry to get it going, and so there's a lot of money there, you know. And I think this year, you know, it's a weird deal, I think, as far as what they were paying, but I think everyone's, you know, guaranteed to at least do pretty well, at least solid six figures, and then some are still making over $1 million. And then I think you know, I think that's a little confusing. Then the other thing is really confusing is, and I think they probably need to change this, is the bracketing is not a real bracket. It's like, it has to do with what how many points you beat the previous team by or something. I don't even understand it. I haven't really looked at it that heavily, but it's bizarre. You don't know from one day to the next. Like in a normal bracket, you know, okay, if we win, then we're going to play the winner of this team versus that team, but you don't know that with this players era, and I think that's got to hurt the interest level a little bit. So, but I would imagine they'll fix that. But yeah, it's a strange deal, but it's one of many things that have kind of crept out of this new era that college sports is in.
All right, 2 more questions here. This one comes from Logan. Logan says Arizona seems to have little weakness right now. If you had to point to 1 to 2 things that the team needs to improve on throughout the year, what would it be? He gives some examples: close out on perimeter defense, high pick and roll defense, etc. And he also asks, what are 1 to 2 things that Arizona does elite? You go ahead and tackle the weaknesses. What do you think are some of the things that they can still improve on as a team?
Well, I think, you know, the closing out's interesting, especially when the other teams got a stretch, 1 or 2 stretch bigs, and sometimes Arizona has not been the greatest at getting out there and defending them. That is really a nitpicky thing, but it is kind of true, and part of that is their philosophy is that, you know, sometimes they'd rather, you know, not gamble with sending a player out that far. Maybe he hedges a little bit or whatever, and so that's part of that strategy. But maybe there's a tiny bit there that could be done better. You know, I think you know, elite, it's pretty easy to identify. You know, defensively and rebounding wise inside, they're just blowing teams out, and you know, it's hard for anybody to really compare with what they do there. You know, and then I think maybe, you know, it's the whole 3-point thing is interesting offensively for them, because they're actually pretty good 3-point shooting team, like 38% or so far. They just don't take a lot. So that's the question, is if they, I think, look at this now, they're 300, they rank 363 out of 365 teams in Division I, I think now, in the percentage of threes that you take as a percentage of your overall field goals, meaning they basically, you know, don't, 27%. So only about a little over a quarter of the time when they take a shot, it's behind 3, because they don't need to, obviously, for obvious reasons. But if they get in some matchups where for some reason, you know, the way they're being defended, and we've seen this a little, they need to hit more. Are they going to be able to hit it? Is Burries, who's not shot that many threes, I don't think, can he hit? You know, is Del Orso going to be hot and cold? Jaden Bradley, you know, guys like that, can they get it from there? I mean, Karchenkov has actually, you know, shot some, but that's probably one thing that concerns me, is if they, you know, they get into some situations like that, and if their threes aren't going and they need them more for whatever reason, either defensively or because they're having fouls up front or whatever, you know, can they pull it out? And that's a little bit of a concern, but it is. But again, this, like we said, it's a pretty balanced team. It's nitpicky to get into some of these things that they don't have, at least as of right now.
Yeah, there's, as you said, there's only one team in the country that takes a lower percentage of its shots from beyond the arc than Arizona, which is crazy. But their percentage, I think they're ranked like 37th in the country in 3-point percentage. So it's not like they can't do it. They just choose not to. Now, they could get into some situations where the other team just happens to be red hot from 3. they fall behind and they need to make threes to catch up. Del Orso is definitely a good 3-point shooter. Jaden Bradley's pretty solid. Dwayne Aristote actually is like very much looking like that 3-and-D type of player. Just again, not a lot of volume there. And Burry's, he's not shy about putting up threes. Even Krivas has taken a couple.
Made his first.
Made some, right? So, yeah, but that is one that I would point to too. Is just that 3-point element. Like, can you win a national championship when you're taking only 27% of your shots from three? I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Right.
We have one more here from Pap. This one's looking ahead a little bit, probably longer into the future than you'd want to, Bruce. But how many guys will leave for the NBA or elsewhere? Burries, Karchenkov, Krivas, etc. I know it's so hard to say.
Who knows?
Right? Who knows?
Well, I think between the portal and the NBA draft, I just think you can't count on anybody coming back. I mean, maybe they can count on C.D. Gay coming back because he seems committed. But then again, Emmanuel Steffen looked like that guy a year ago, and he left for UNLV. So, you know, obviously they've got a lot of seniors. They're all done. You know, Krivas, they didn't even bother listing him as a redshirt. He's technically a redshirt sophomore. He's listed as a junior because he's not going to stick around for 3 more years or whatever. You know, I don't, you know, Karchenkov could, you know, it'll be interesting to see. He could be a guy who wants to come back and become, if he thinks he can be a lottery pick, maybe he comes back. You know, Aristote certainly you would think would be a guy that could come back and really take off, but he's also a guy that somebody could pluck out of the portal if especially if the NIL blows up again, where somebody finds a loophole and you can throw guys $2 or $3 million at guys. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if that happens, maybe Arizona could, you know, some of those players could be threatened. But you know, you got to figure Cole Pete, the way he's playing, is going to leave, and you know, the seniors, and then Brayden Burries would be interesting to see. He's, you know, not projected to be picked now, but you know, he's got, you know, so he might come back, kind of like maybe develop like maybe a Jaden Bradley guy, take a couple years. You know, I think that would be good for him and the program. But you know, if he progresses this year to where, you know, he could go, that could happen. You know, he could also be I'm sure somebody that, you know, the transfer portal, you know, there's always going to be a threat. So it's just really hard to say. I mean, maybe a handful of guys, but I do think that probably even though this is the case all the time, they're generally flipping over half the roster. It might be even more this year. And, you know, if they do get to the Final Four, you know, have a great season the way they're playing now, you know, that often can lead to even more departures. So it's just too hard to say right now, but
yeah. A statement and a question off of what Pap said. First of all, my statement is, if you can retain half of your roster in basketball these days, I think you're doing really well.
Yeah.
Like 6 out of 12 or 7 out of 14, whatever the number is. So, I mean, who knows? My question for you, Bruce, is do you think that international players are less likely to transfer or be one and dones or whatever the case might be? And does that help them with someone like Karchenkov or Aristote or CDK, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was more the case before. I remember Zulis Tubelis, you know, granted this is before the portal got really crazy, but I remember there was some thought that he might transfer not only after Sean Miller was gone, but also I think even the other year. And I remember, you know, the reaction, I asked him about it once, and the reaction was like, why would I leave? You know, it was like kind of like it used to be back in the 80s and 90s or whatever. And, you know, but I think that has to do with, in my opinion, that has to do with a lot of these international guys. They come up with one club, they sign with their youth club or whatever. They, you know, like Karchenkov was always with Munich Bayern. He stayed with them at different levels. And so they don't grow up changing high schools. They don't grow up changing their club team every summer or even within a summer like some of the American kids do. So they don't have that kind of culture, that mentality of like, you know, I've always got to look at something to find the greenest possible grass or whatever. I gotta, there's always something better. I think the international guys are less likely to be that way and therefore more likely to stay. But yeah, as we saw with Henry Vasar, who liked it here, and I think he would have stayed, but sometimes the international players or anybody, if there's more money to be made somewhere else and it's a lot more and maybe just as much or a better role, then they're gone. And that's why Henry Vasar is gone. That's probably why KJ Lewis is gone, So I guess, yeah, they're a little more likely to stay, but even that doesn't, in this day and age, doesn't guarantee anything.
All right, so Bruce is going to be up in Phoenix on Saturday night covering Arizona against San Diego State. 2 more home games in the non-con coming up each of the next 2 Mondays. Bethune-Cookman and South Dakota State. Those games are both at 7 p.m. The San Diego State game is scheduled for 8:30. Might start even later than that with a doubleheader and another game ahead of it. Besides covering basketball, Bruce, are you going to be able to spend time with your family here over the holidays? Kids coming to town, or what's the deal?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. In fact, we got a couple of them flying into Phoenix, so we'll go up there and stay for that game on Saturday, and then so it's good. You always hope kind of that last game before Christmas will be like the 19th or 20th. When it's the 22nd, that means you're working 23rd, 24th. And then it gets to be Christmas Eve before you know it. And but hopefully a couple days there at least. But yeah, it's that's the one good thing about college basketball. Generally you're working Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving means almost nothing. You're usually somewhere random, or in some place like Bahamas where there isn't even a thing called Thanksgiving except for tourists, but Christmas is always protected usually. So that's kind of nice. I think the one exception was years ago, Sean Miller took him to the Diamond Head, where the championship game is on Christmas. And that was a little weird and kind of a bummer. Like I think I was on an iPad while everyone opened Christmas presents back here. And, I'm on an iPad in some random hotel room in Waikiki or whatever, and you can't complain about being in Waikiki, but still. So, but anyway, none of that problem now. So it's all good. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. This is the life that we have chosen, and there are sacrifices that you have to make in order to do this job that we love to do. We will be back next week. That's the plan, anyway. Myself, Justin Spears, and Jordan Ham with a Big 12 Bowl Bonanza special, previewing all the postseason games coming up. We thank Bruce Pascoe so much for joining us on this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify. The video version of this can be found on our website, which is Tucson.com. Also available through our apps. We have a sports-only app called the Wildcaster. You also can, if you're a subscriber, there's a Tucson.com app that's super easy to use. So a lot of ways to consume our stuff. Thanks again for listening, everybody. We will see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks.